Good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for coming. I'm Molly Starback, Director of the Office of Postdoctoral Services, and I'd like to welcome you to our panel discussion on non-tenure track faculty careers in the sciences and engineering. This workshop is part of the Academic Job Search Series and is co-sponsored by the Graduate School and the Career Center. And if you have any questions about upcoming events, you can look on the website, which if you get emails from me, you'll find it in those lengthy emails I send with upcoming events. So I'd like to begin by thanking our panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to come here today. We really appreciate you sharing your time and your advice with us. So yay, panelists! And our panelists are Arthur Mosley, who is Associate Research Professor and Director of Proteomics for the School of Medicine. Tyler Bletch, who is Assistant Professor of the Practice for Electrical and Computer Engineering. Jennifer Carbray, who is Assistant Research Professor of Cell Biology, and Julie Reynolds, who is Associate Professor of the Practice of the Department of Biology. So I'll ask the panelists to introduce themselves and briefly fill us in on their backgrounds, and then we'll start with questions. Many of you submitted questions online. Thank you. So we will start with those and then move to questions from the audience.
Ladies first.
So, how much of an intro do you want?
Like, how you went from being a graduate student to, and you were at the Thompson writing.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then how you
So 2 minutes. We could all talk for a while. So thanks for having us. This is fun. I'm Julie Reynolds, and my background is I have a PhD in biology. I'm a population ecologist. And when I was finishing up my graduate degree, I was living overseas with my husband and small child while he was doing research. And was pregnant with my second child, not really ready to go on the job market, but a postdoctoral position opened up, was advertised here at Duke, at the Duke Writing Center. And it was looking for interdisciplinary postdocs to teach academic writing. And I thought, what have I got to lose? Because I grew up in North Carolina, I thought it'd be kind of fun to come back. So that's the only thing I applied for, and was very shocked that I was offered the job, because I'm thinking, I'm a scientist, what do I know about teaching writing? But I had thought a lot about how writing is so important to undergraduates, and how we don't really teach them in the sciences how to do that technical aspects of writing and the writing from the perspective of science. So I got that position and was just sort of, being in the right place at the right time. And then through being in that program, opportunities came up, and I eventually found, as things arose in the biology department, I applied for an instructor position and started to do research in science education, and then am now an associate professor of the practice. So I'll tell you more about the research piece if you're interested in that, but I do science education research focusing on how we can use writing to teach conceptual understanding in the sciences.
I'm Jennifer Carbray. I'm in the cell biology department. I came here to Duke 12 years ago as a lab manager for a lab that moved to Duke. But as I was the lab manager, I also started doing a little bit of teaching with medical students, because I had that as an interest as well. And then after only a couple of years of that, my mentor moved away from Duke. And so I wanted to stay here, and so I was able to get a position where I teach medical students almost exclusively, but I've also had the time to do some other projects, like teaching undergraduate course, and a colleague and I also have a course on Coursera. It's a massive open online course. And then also do some medical education research as well.
I'm Tyler Bletch. I was getting my PhD at NC State. My plan was I wanted to go into teaching, which was weird because that's not the usual thing you're looking for right out of a PhD. But while I was working on that, I got an offer for an internship in industry at a company called NetApp, and they were doing interesting stuff. I'm like, all right, I'll do this until I get bored or fired, and then I'll go teach. And I never got fired. I tried really hard. Severance is much better that way. But eventually, I kind of like, I did cool stuff. I'm glad I did. I think it made me better rounded. But eventually, I kind of reached a point where like, okay, it's time to get back on the original plan. And around that time, I was very fortunate that there was a professor of the practice teaching position open in the ECE department here at Duke, and that kind of lined up really well. And I got very fortunate that I could shift into that. That was about 2 years ago.
Well, I'm Arthur Mosley. I have been at Duke for 12 years now. I did my PhD at UNC, don't throw anything, and was considering a postdoc position out in California, but was lured by money and access to instrumentation at then Glaxo. My field is in mass spectrometry, and for those of you that aren't familiar with mass spectrometers, the good one started about $500,000, and the most recent one we acquired here was $1.2 million. So you going into a startup professorship, you either go to a place that has an old beat-up mass spec that they expect you to use, or you struggle desperately to try and get a new instrument. So I went to Glaxo welcome GlaxoSmithKline, was there for 16 years, and ended up managing labs both here in the US and in the UK, doing proteomics mass spectrometry, basically what is it and how much of it's there. And when I was doing some novel work in protein analysis, Alan Roses, some of you may or may not have ever heard his name associated with Alzheimer's and Duke, he called me up and said that there's a new assistant professor that's doing some interesting work with protein pull downs. Can you help her out? And I said, sure. And so we did some collaborative work together. It worked out really nicely. And then accelerated about 8 years, and I get a call from that assistant professor who's now the vice dean for basic sciences at Duke, Sally Kornbluth, now provost. She says, we're going to start up a new lab at Duke. Would you like to come over and start it up? You'll have to start it from scratch and do it your way. And I'm going, okay, sounds like a good idea to me. So came here, started up with just myself and one of my colleagues, also from UNC. We've now grown to a laboratory of 10 people with 5 PhDs, 4 of whom are research professors. We have a little over $6 million worth of, about to say toys. Some people look at me funny when I say that, but it is fun what we do. We have great instrumentation. We just built new labs for us down in the Chesterfield in downtown Durham. And one of the things that I love about the position that I have, which is managing the proteomics and metabolomics core facility, or shared resource if you prefer official School of Medicine lingo, is that we work with everyone across the School of Medicine and the university, but principally the School of Medicine. So we get to work with a lot of people doing a lot of different things and learn about their research and figure out experimental designs, how we can be a force amplifier for their research. But it's very collaborative, very interactive, and quite frankly, we have a blast in our laboratories. It's a great group of people, and the fact that it's not a tenure track position, to be honest with you, is actually attractive to me, because you don't have the struggle with the publish or perish or get all your funding. I think of it as diversifying your financial portfolio while I diversify the scientific portfolio, because we get to call on the intellectual strength of all the professors around Duke and get to work with them. So it allows us to do what we do well in collaboration with people who do something completely different well. And so it's actually been a lot of fun. And open invitation if you're ever interested in proteomics or metabolomics and mass spectrometry, come down to the Chesterfield and visit us. It's the big Liggett and Myers building right across from Blackleaf Square.
Thank you. So it sounds like Jennifer and Julie and Arthur, your positions kind of grew organically, like after you were here, whereas Tyler, you actually applied for your position. But since I've been here for 12 years, I've seen a lot more, a big growth in like professor of the practice positions and research. So could you talk a little bit about like how you see that working? Like, so if people here, if this kind of position is attractive to them, how would they go, how would they position themselves, how would they find these positions?
I'm in the biology department, and I've worked with other faculty in non-tenure track positions in Trinity college. And really, we've thought a lot about what are these positions, and different departments really treat these positions very differently. Some of the departments use them for their master teachers, some of them use them for spousal accommodation, and some of them use them for education researchers. And so it really depends on what department philosophy is. So that unfortunately there is not a sort of a campus-wide philosophy about what a professor of the practice is. And so in our department, in biology, I think it is true that we've never advertised for a professor of the practice position. I was a postdoc in the writing program, and then the biology department hired me as a joint postdoc. That's how I got my foot in the door. And then they said, hey, we really would like you to keep teaching. So I had a 1-year instructor position. And then they said, hey, we really would like you to do administration for us. And I said, well, the only way I'm going to do that is if I'm on the professor of the practice track. And they sort of balked at that, but then they're like, all right. So mine really was very organic, and it was a foot in the door kind of situation. And other departments, I know statistics, they advertise and they hire people as professors of the practice. So at least at Duke, it is very department specific.
Yeah, a piece of advice I'd give, because so often they aren't advertised, is if your postdoctoral mentor lets you volunteer in other aspects of the community, then that's helpful. So that's what my mentor let me do, was do a little bit of teaching in the medical school, and so then the faculty there saw that I was decent at teaching, and so then that's what led to the position that I have now. Or the other thing is, I know people who will teach at a community college or a place like Elon in the evenings to get their foot in the door in terms of teaching as well. But then, yeah, our non-tenure track faculty in cell biology are often assistant research professors, which is what I started off as, and they're mostly people who started off in the lab but then want to remain in that lab but have grown in their position. So they're doing things like writing grants and things within that lab, and so that's why they get moved to the non-tenure track research professor track in cell biology.
Yeah, I'd agree that yeah, there's definitely an organic aspect to it. So even though I did, apply, and I went to the formal front door, the reason I had the experience to credibly apply is that I'd been adjunct teaching at NC State for several courses for a while, so I was building up teaching experience and credibility in that space. Adjunct positions they're kind of weird, and they're sometimes controversial, because there's some institutions that just, back the truck and say, all right, all you adjuncts get in, we're going to teach 5 courses, and just kind of like it's a dime a dozen kind of low rent kind of thing. Some institutions, adjuncts are primarily industry people coming out to teach a course because they enjoy it. There's kind of a mixed bag there, and usually the way you get into that is with direct connections. It's not often I've seen like an adjunct posting to get in. In terms of the professor of the practice role that I was able to come into here, in engineering, especially departments that are undergoing a lot of growth, what some departments find is their teaching demands are going up like this, and research faculty, because of their research load, the tenure track load, they can't just scale research faculty in proportion. That just doesn't, the math doesn't add up. Whereas if they pick up some non-tenure track teaching focused faculty, they can fill those gaps without going down the path of tons of adjuncts, tons of lecturers, where you have this mixed bag. So it's about building a part of the faculty within a department that's more teaching focused, but it's still fully integrated. It's not like I don't feel like I'm in like a separate zone of professor of the practice level. It's I'm faculty. I go to all the meetings. I can sign anything. I can have students. I can do whatever I want. But I'm teaching focused, so I invest more in that area. Just the ratios are a bit different.
As far as positions as I have, obviously I ended up having a direct connection through Professor Greenwood and Professor Rose's, but really what led to that was networking, being reasonably good at what you do, but go to national meetings, make sure you maintain visibility as far as presentations, posters, whatever it may be, and become active in area discussion groups. There's the Triangle Area Mass Spec Discussion Group, which I was one of the leaders of for about a decade, and that was before coming here. So doing as much as you can to sort of put yourself in a high visibility position so people know who you are and what you're doing, and that is what led to my coming here and several of the people that work for us. That's exactly how I was able to make contact with them, is that I knew them from national meetings or knew them from the Triangle Areas Mass Spec Discussion Group, and that was how the contacts were made. So I'd say networking, do all you can to maintain as high visibility as you can, and go to the national meetings. Don't get unhappy if you get a poster instead of a speaking presentation, because some of the most interesting discussions I've had have been around poster sessions. So just putting yourself out there and doing as good a job as you can in maintaining a high visibility and high quality work. Obviously all of you do high quality work or you wouldn't be here at Duke, so that part of it's not a problem. Just make sure you maintain the visibility and do all you can to help people see you.
And to be clear, you can still be a PI in these positions.
Yes.
You can still publish in these positions. How would you say those expectations differ from people on the tenure track?
So I have a funny story. A couple years ago, I was chatting with the chair of my department, and he looked at me and said, "Why aren't you tenure track?" And I was like, "Why are you asking me?" You know. But I did have the answer, and the answer is that, and his question, first of all, was because I have three multi-million-dollar grants right now. I publish at a level that is comparable to other faculty in the biology department. And he was like, "Well, why, how is that different than the tenure track faculty?" And I said, well, the difference is I don't have a home for being tenured. The biology department, to have a tenure track position for someone doing biology education research would be very progressive, and our department's not quite there, because it does take away from another tenure track line. I am regular rank faculty, of course, so I get to go to all of the, I have all those responsibilities and privileges. And I have a joint appointment with the program in education, because my research is education research. But they're a program, not a department, so there's not a tenure home there either. So that was the point at which I said, well, we can't really, I don't think Duke is ready for that transition, but let's talk salary equity. So, because professors of the practice I know in my department are paid pretty significantly less than our tenure track faculty. And by having the research load that I have, I was able to negotiate that so that I am within the range of our tenure track faculty. So, yes?
Yes, I may have missed this. Can you define tenure home again for me? I didn't quite understand.
Oh, to be tenured in a department, you would, the department would need to, so there are a limited number of tenured track positions in each department, and the biology department wants to reserve those for people doing biological research, and I get that, that's totally fair. I think if we had a department, an education department, then it would be a natural fit for me to have a tenured track position in that department, but we don't have that at Duke. We have a program in education. So none of those faculty have their tenure in the program. It has to be like in the English department or somewhere else. So.
Okay, thank you.
And you had a question before?
Yeah, my question is very related to this question. I wanted to know what is the difference between tenure and non-tenure track position?
So non-tenure tracks are contract. We have contracts, and so when I first started off as an assistant professor of the practice, my contract was 3 years. Now an associate, my contracts are 5 years, and they're renewable. You can be renewed within the rank one time, and then you go up for promotion to the next level. So I'm actually up for renewal right now. And so there's a possibility that I won't be renewed, and then I won't have a job, right? So that's the difference. If you're tenured, you would, once you get tenure, you have job security.
Yeah, I understand.
Oh, okay.
But more, I mean, in terms of the difference, in terms of expectations that.
Oh, yeah. So this is a little bit of a problem because I do research at a level that's comparable to my tenure track colleagues, but then my teaching load's higher. So I've had to negotiate that with my chair. So the teaching load for our tenure track is one big, in biology, this is just biology at Duke, is one large class and one small class. So it tends, and large can be large in size, or it can be a lab class, or it can be a writing intensive class. So they have a 1-1 teaching load, and professors of the practice in our department have a 3-course teaching load, 2 big, 1 small. And so I've negotiated that to 2 medium and 1 small. So, so our teaching load is heavier, and then I have research that I do. And then the tricky part is I can't have graduate students. So I have to hire postdocs to work for me. Because what would I be mentoring the graduate student in? We can't give them a degree in biology education research at Duke. And so that is a limitation to my research. So I have to be creative.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I just want to say, it really depends per department, per institution. For me, professor of the practice means somewhere between 70–80% teaching as like my responsibilities, and then the really neat thing is the 20–30% is question marks. Kind of each professor of the practice kind of defines what that's going to be. I think you define your 30% as 50%. You just made a number go up.
Yeah.
You're at more than 1.
Yes.
I didn't do that. Don't do that's a mistake.
Kind of is. Yeah. We do more. And then
so I work in hands-on programs for students. So I work with developing programs for hands-on practical education as projects, independent study efforts, that kind of thing. And it's interesting because a lot of people chart their own course in a position like this. So one professor of practice in the department is the director of undergraduate studies. So she does lots of curriculum management, so administration. Our DGS is also professor of practice, same kind of thing, but at the graduate level, negotiating with departments. So you could have an administrative dimension. We have some professors of practice where teaching research is maybe not their primary, but their secondary thing on top of the teaching they do. We have professors of practice that just do straight up research as their additional factor. So at least in the area I'm in, my little sphere, it's about broad freedoms. Personally, I don't bring in big grants or anything. Everything I like is cheap. Like, they give me discretion. Like, okay, I'm set for life. I can do everything I want. So it's just about charting your own course and seeing what the institution and the department is like, and if it matches what you're looking for.
The not having graduate students, is that specific to the biology department, or do you see that as well in the ECE department?
I've never actually tried. I don't think I would in good conscience take on a PhD student. I don't have the bandwidth to do it justice the way it needs to be done. I am an advisor to master's students, like through the normal master's advising program. I do sponsor independent studies, so in pretty much most ways except full-on PhD candidates, I can fill all the normal responsibilities.
When I was, I'm still an assistant research professor, but I was a lab manager, so I was doing research, writing R1s, putting together human subjects, protocols, things like that. but for my mentor, he just won a Nobel Prize, so he had no time. So basically, I was running his lab, and essentially I had graduate students that I was mentoring because he said, you know, you have the time, so this is essentially your student. I mean, I don't know that it was official, but for instance, I was on all of the students' papers, I helped him edit his thesis, things like that. So in that role, I essentially had graduate students and a technician as well.
Yes.
So you mentioned the contract renewal, and I'm curious, I think we all, at least secondhand hear about how stressful when a tenure track professor is going up for tenure, how, you know, straining that is. Is that contract renewal kind of similar to that process, except it happens on a cycle, so you just do it over and over again, or is it really a much more relaxed type of discussion that you have just between you and your chair, or is there a full committee that you're going before?
It is an official process. You have a committee. It has to be approved by the faculty and it has to be approved by the deans. So it's an official process. It is not as stressful in the sense of it, well, I mean, it varies, right? So the stakes they're not generally as high in the sense that you have a pretty good idea of what is required for going up for a renewal. But the challenge that I find is that the university right now is constantly redefining what professor of the practice is. And so a colleague of mine went up for, she's been associate professor of the practice for a while. She went up for promotion to full, and the biology department has never had anybody achieve full professor of the practice. And it's surprising because we have very clear criteria for what it would take, and then it seems like the ground always shifts and nobody can achieve it. So I was going to go up for full this year, and I thought, you know what, I don't want the department or myself to go up for full and not get it. So we need to have a better sense of what it's going to take, and we need consistency between the expectations of the university and the department before I'm willing to do that. Because the department approved it and then higher up didn't. So anyway, it was confusing for everybody. So I think that is the challenge, is it's a relatively new position and it is defined differently in different departments. And so there's a lot of confusion about it. So when I go up, I don't want to get a no. So
I have no clock. I could stay an assistant research professor the rest of my career if I wanted to. I need to teach 2 medical school courses. That is my job. And so there's zero stress when my contract gets renewed, because I do enough that I'm going to be really painful to replace. So there's zero stress. And then I think we have to have 6 months or a year's worth of notice if our contract is not going to be extended. It's at least 6 months and it may be a year. So if I wasn't going to get my contract extended, I would have to have a lot of notice, obviously, to search for a job. So for me, there's no stress and there's no clock. I teach, and then if I want to do a lot of research so that I get promoted quickly, that's fine, but if I don't want to, that's fine as well.
Yeah, I kind of echo that. I think it's kind of like an industry job. Okay, of course, an industry job can go away if the earnings is bad and the CEO's nuts. Like that's a factor that you don't have to deal with. But in a healthy industry environment, you kind of know if you're doing well. People are saying, okay, that's good. These boxes are getting ticked. You're getting good feedback, and you kind of have that in this kind of role as well. There's not like a formal feedback process, and that's actually one of the things that my department's trying to evolve is feedback and criteria for advancement for the rest of the practice. That's mainly for moving up, more than I don't know if any contract renewal was surprise, you're unsatisfactory and not getting renewed.
The same is for me as you. There's zero stress of whatever decisions they may be made or being made behind the background made in the background, once a year I get a letter saying you're being renewed for the next year. So what do I have to do to make sure that the letter comes? I have to make sure that our laboratory, one, we have a balanced budget. Core facilities are forbidden by law for making a profit, and we're forbidden by Duke from running a loss. And it's kind of a narrow margin. And because of the skill sets of the people that I've been able to hire, our laboratory has been able to balance its budget. It's one of the few cores that actually does do that. So the success for me is defined as happy PIs. Have we been able to support their research? Are we giving them state-of-the-art results? Is there any question with regards to their publication? And indeed, most PIs value our work to the extent that members of our laboratory end up as co-authors on their publications. We are somewhere north of 60 or 70 publications. Frankly, I lost count because the number of publications isn't a figure of merit for us. It's what the figure of merit for us is having a productive research environment that's able to be a force amplifier for the different PIs and ensuring that we are delivering and that they know we're delivering state-of-the-art capabilities to them for their research. So as far as the stress is concerned at renewal, there is no stress. It could be just like industry. You show up one day and they decide they don't need you anymore. But I feel incredibly more secure here than I ever felt in industry. I spent 16 years in industry. Because in industry, like you say, it's whether or not some stock analyst thought that your company should have made X increase and you only made Y increase, and so the CEO does something to shift things around. Or the CEO, or in our case, the head of R&D aged out, and a new head of R&D came in, and they always have to shift things around and try and prove that they're worth their exorbitant salaries that they're actually making. My colleagues in industry, I don't know of any of them that does not feel like they're constantly looking over their shoulder. There's so much reorgs, and your ability to influence that is effectively zip. You can have outstanding reviews every year for 16 years, and if your division shut down, your division shut down. Thank you, see you very much. Thank you very much. We'll see you. Good luck with your future endeavors. So working in an academic environment to me is much more both satisfying and less stressful. And I will point out one other thing, though, having worked in industry has been a real asset to me, and indeed 6 of the 10 people in our laboratory came from industry. And the advantage there isn't that industry necessarily gives you better preparation at all, but this is what you need to do, this is what it needs to be done by, this is what the deliverables actually have to be, and this is the budget tools that you've got to do it. Now go do it, go away, come back, give me the results. And so we have a very industrial focus in terms of this is the project, go get it done, get the results back, do it as quickly as you can. And that may sound like it's inducing stress, but the nature of the work that we do and the collaborative interaction and the quality of the resources in terms of instrumentation that the school knows and started us up with, and then that I've been able to continue through S10 grants, instrumentation grants, and even those are collaborative. The one that I'm awaiting on a final verdict, I had 24 PIs that were, or co-Is, whatever they want to call them. I was the PI, but they were all co-Is. They were all having research projects that were going to be using this particular piece of instrumentation.
You first and then you.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, it's first.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, Judy, thank you for starting BioCore. I'm the new postdoc at the BioCore.
Wonderful, welcome.
And then I have 3 questions. You guys said your clock didn't tick, but you were saying that yours did. Is it comparable to the clock ticking for a tenure track position?
So I will echo that I don't feel pressure that I'm going to be fired, right? I feel like I have shown my chops here at Duke and that they will renew me. The pressure that I feel is I'm trying to break a ceiling that has never been broken. We've had professors of the practice in biology for 20 years and no one has ever gotten full. And so, and in fact, the first time I went up for reappointment, they got external letters, although that's not required for professor of the practice, because they're kind of trying to think about what this position might be. And so the ground is shifting, and so that's where I feel the pressure, because I want to help break that ceiling, but in a way that's not going to be too stressful for me. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then the second question was, what's the difference between assistant research professor of practice and an assistant professor of practice? The third one before, do you regret not going to tenure track? That was my question.
Yeah.
Right. For me, being a research professor, that means that the only way I can be promoted is through research. So when I do want to get promoted, I will be trying to go to professor of the practice of medical education, that track. So I need to move tracks to really be promoted because I'm not doing scientific research, just educational research. So that's the difference for me and for us, yeah.
I would say that's all true. I would add that for me personally, this is not a general thing, this is me. I just want to do what I think is good, like in terms of educational goals and programs. I have no interest in the promotion process and titles. I can't see it unlocking anything, and I don't care if the money number goes up, so I'm just going to do good stuff, and if they want to change my business card, we'll print new ones.
I want to echo that. It's exactly the same. I came in as a staff member, and then within a year I was assistant research professor, and I mean I went directly to an associate research professor because I'm old, I guess, and have lots of experience. Let's not worry about that intermediate step. But the only difference that made to me was that I could serve as a PI or a co-I on research grants, which actually helps those grants get funded because the funding agency can see that the requisite skill set to do a particular part of the experiment is in place. And it seems that in academia there may be a lot of ego involved in a lot of positions. Don't quote me on that. It doesn't. So, you know, they could call me Fred, they could call me Ted, they can call me anything but fired, and I'm happy. Because it really doesn't matter what they call me, because it doesn't impact what I do on a day-to-day basis. And if they came in and said, you're going to be full, which I have no expectations of, and I've never really thought about trying or exploring what the options to be full would be, and I don't really care, because as far as I can tell, and as it's been expressed to me, it doesn't really make any difference. As long as the PIs that we're supporting are happy, the administration's happy, and they're happy enough with our laboratory. Again, give credit to my staff because they're the ones that make it work. But they just gave us, our new labs were $3.4 million for construction. We got over, for the first time since I've been here, the school gave me more money for instrumentation. We got about $2.7 million worth less cost of new instrumentation. So did it make any difference whether I was an assistant or associate or full? I don't think so. It's just a matter of, as you were saying, doing good research, doing good work. And I don't mean to in any way disparage the different tracks and say it isn't important. And in fact, I think what you're trying to do, I admire that.
You have a real goal.
But it's not critical for my continued success at Duke to be called one thing or the other to the extent that I can tell.
Yeah, so I've heard a rumor, I don't know if this is true, that some of these types of positions do require you to bring in grants, and if you don't bring in grants, you don't get paid. Is that true at all for any of these types?
Not that I've seen.
No. Professor of the practice is a regular ranked position, so it is salary. It's a 9-month position in Trinity.
Okay.
So in my department, it used to be that people could be in the professor of the practice and be master teachers and do service but do no research. And now there's a scholarship component of it, but it's a modest component. So people don't have to bring in external grants.
Okay. And can I ask one more? And so this is very general, but I mean, are there general differences in salary between staff versus professor positions? Because there are staff positions here, for example, bioinformaticians and so on. Programmers, bioinformaticians, these are not professorship positions, but I wondered whether there was a general difference in salary between those that you know of.
I wouldn't have any way of knowing.
Yeah,
I did say that.
Duke's pretty private about
Yeah.
their salaries.
Okay.
The professors of the practice in Trinity all got together and were like, we suspect that we are getting paid a lot less than School of Medicine for sure, and then even from staff positions. And so our collective sharing of how much we were making provoked some outrage. So we were able to bump some of that. But let's just say we are not overly compensated for our work.
Sure, yeah. Okay.
And I think from my position, since we support the university as a whole, but the vast majority of our work does come from the School of Medicine, one of the clearest ways that I can tell whether or not I'm dealing with a basic science researcher or a clinical science researcher is the basic science researcher says, how much is this going to cost? And the clinical science researcher says, when can I get my data? That is reflective of something. I'm not exactly sure why it is or whether it's justified, but it does seem like that within the School of Medicine, there does seem to be more money available for people to use our resource. And I don't think that's really got anything to do with what Duke is paying those people. It's got to do with the level of funding that's available from NSF and NIH. And if you've watched our government, if you want to have your job be dependent upon funding by going into a full tenure track position, well, good luck to you. Because they don't seem to be able to agree on a budget that extends more than about 30 or 90 days.
And for salary information for Duke, you can go to the HR site, and under compensation, there is a giant spreadsheet that has all staff positions listed, including able seaman. I think that's the first one on the list.
Great.
Marine lab.
Oh.
So, but you know, with the caveat that it's a huge range, so like 20,000 to 90,000, and you're like, well, which one is it? So, but that can give you some idea.
Great.
Some positions are blank, so that gives you, if there's a director of development for the blah 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 institute, like that might be blank. No, you can compare that. You can compare it to information from the Chronicle of Higher Education, which does a salary survey every year and parses it pretty finely. But again, grain of salt. I think the best way is just to ask people, like, would you mind giving me a ballpark for what a new person like me could expect in this field?
Okay.
Yes, question.
For those of you that are more teaching-based, does student evaluations at the end of the semester have a higher weight on your performance review or your when you're out for renewal? Like, do they look at how students rated you in your classes?
So I have not gone up for renewal, but I've talked to people who have, and it is a factor. I mean, when they're evaluated, they do look at your teaching performance, and evaluations are a significant part of that. Part of that comes back to like what are the stakes at renewal, and are you going for promotion? So if you're worried about renewal, as long as they're not saying like punch me in the throat and I'm really sad, like you're not gonna. As long as it's net positive and you're fulfilling the educational mission, I don't think they're going to parse like how many outstandings versus graces are there and get the nitty-gritty. For promotion, well, the book's still being written on that, so it's hard to say where the bar is.
Yeah, I think people understand that student evaluations are student evaluations. They're not something to be extremely strict about.
Yeah.
And that's also just, especially for me, a lot of what I have to do is just run really big courses. So it's not just the teaching, it's the administration and the logistics and interacting with staff and other faculty that would go into the decision about my value as well.
Student evaluations are student satisfaction surveys. That's what they are. They're not really an assessment of how well you are teaching, but they are a piece of the promotion package. And so what I do is I narrate that because I'm teaching a new course that's an intro ecology course full of pre-meds that are not interested in ecology, and it's required. And so it's intro level, those tend to get lower evaluations. It's required, they don't want to be there, and then it's a topic that undergraduates think they hate ecology. I'm like, you don't hate ecology? It's not right. You may prioritize other things. But so I narrate that so that with the other data that exists about student evaluations, it's put in context so people don't overly emphasize student satisfaction.
Yes, purple shirt.
Do you feel like you have the respect of your tenure track colleagues?
I do. There has not been any circumstance in which professor of the practice, anyone in that group was singled out or anything didn't feel different in a way. I think the only difference I've experienced is tenure decision meetings when they start with like a giant tenure package and there's a whole committee. I'm not on that, which is great. Like, and now the 1 hour boring thing. I'm sorry, I gotta go. There's rules. I gotta get out of here. And I mean, in my department, both the DUS and DGS are professors of practice, and those are quite significant positions involving curriculum and departmental planning and budgeting. So for my little sphere, I haven't seen that.
I'll say ditto. I've never felt that not being a tenure track professor has impeded any of the discussions and collaborations that I've had with any of the PIs around here.
Well, I know we're being recorded, and this is...
What?
What? But I will say that I have earned the respect, but it did not come initially. And that I had one faculty member say to me early on in my career in the department, I've been there 15 years, say to me, I don't think people like you should be teaching intro bio. And I'm like, what do you mean people like me? And he meant non-tenure track faculty, because he thinks that only the tenured faculty, in fact, tenure track faculty have the expertise to teach intro bio.
Oh no, that's a wrong opinion.
And what happened over time, and so I had two people say things like that to me, and I am of the personality that I will smile and I will nod and I will show them. And so over time, the faculty in my department have seen my work, have seen the grants I bring in and the quality of the publications I do. And then these two people who said these pretty awful things to me later thanked me for my work in the department and appreciate my perspective. So I think there are some traditionalists that find these new positions to be a little suspicious, but do good work, and I think that they will come around. I think there's this new wave, the younger faculty all get it. And what you say about teaching intro classes, the teaching faculty, they have the time and they have a lot of the expertise that research faculty, they just don't have the bandwidth for. So a lot of the innovation is coming from the non-tenure track teaching faculty.
Do any of you have opinions on the whole argument that tenure is going away anyway? That it won't be around in 10, 15, 20 years?
That seems dumb.
I've heard comments along those lines. Nothing that comes from anyone that's definitive, but the general trend seems to be tenure track positions are becoming less available because if you are tenure track, that's a huge financial commitment that the university is making you. Whereas the fact that, unfortunately, they could say to me, see ya, and not renew me for the next year, that gives them flexibility if they need it. We just work very hard to make sure that they need what it is that we can provide. And I should qualify the comment about did I feel treated any differently. I've had some of the PIs come in and say, well, you're going to do this experiment this way because I'm a PI and you're going to do it this way. And my initial marching orders, as they were from Professor Kornbluth, was one, that I wasn't going to turn any TI away for any reason. work as hard as we could to get an experimental design that worked for them. If they wanted to do it a different way, then I was to write an email very politely and carefully suggesting that this other path might be more feasible. And after a few cycles of that, the PIs have largely come in and said, what is it that we need to do, and how is it that we need to do it, because they respect the opinions of my staff, and with the 4 research professors, I should say the other 3, they are in constant contact with PIs and create experimental designs, and they are very collaborative with the other PIs, and I've never had, there's not a real issue associated with any discrimination. Now, you might ask, do the Nobel laureates consider the other full faculty on the same level? I don't know. I'm not a Nobel laureate, I'm not a full professor, but I think that in industry and in academia, titles do mean things to certain people. As I said, as long as they don't call me fired, I'm happy.
Okay, we have time for one final question. Anybody who hasn't asked a question yet? No? Okay.
I just wanted to jump back to the student surveys and ask sort of the other side of that in your evaluations, and that's the quantitative side, which would be student grades. Do you have sort of any metrics that you have to follow in terms of so many students passing, where it looks bad when you look for evaluation, or that you really need to make sure are passing through your classes, especially those of you that are teaching intro classes, either at the middle school or at the undergraduate level?
It's funny you asked that, because I was teaching this intro ecology course and using, I do science education research, so I was using best practices to really, highly engaged learning, iterative grading, lots of feedback, and my students did really well. And I talked to the chair of my department and I said, is it a problem that, because I think the students met the expectation of the class and they earned the grades they got. They worked hard and they earned the grades they got. But I don't want y'all looking at this like, oh, a bunch of A's and therefore it's an easy class. I'm like, I'll show you what we did. We worked hard and it was a lot of iterations. And he said, that's fine. So I don't have any pressure to have a distribution. I don't have, it doesn't need to be cut off. It doesn't need to be a weed out course. So in my department, we are given complete academic freedom to grade in a way that we think is appropriate.
Yeah, if students aren't performing well, it's never, the eyes don't go to me. I've never thought of this before. I mean, we worry about admissions. We worry about how we can get the students through and get them, and whether or not they should go on because and become physicians. But no, student performance is not really, well, usually it's not an issue too much either, but it's, the eyes don't go to me for that. But part of that is because, the courses have been running for many years, so there's lots of previous knowledge to know whether it's the system versus the student as well.
Yeah, for me, the grading, like there's like kind of general guidelines around grading, like, they should be connected with work, they should be defensible, it should be records, like fairly things that pretty much everyone agrees on. And if you follow these guidelines, it's a reasonable course. Like if the workload is reasonable and the grades are graded for performance, if you can trace the dots and it's consistently graded, that's fine. I had one student file a formal grade complaint over an issue where I wasn't sure about this policy and I submitted the wrong thing and now I'm not sure I should have gotten this grade, and I work with the department because there's a process for formal grade complaint. I said, okay, here are the policies, here's the announcement made, I lay out all the cards, it's fairly mechanically graded. Yeah, that's fine. So even in the case where there's literally a formal process going on, as long as your process for grading and evaluation is reasonable and tied to the goals of the course and the goals of the broader curriculum, you have, freedom to make their assessments.
10 seconds.
Absolutely.
My overall comment to you would be, if you have the opportunity to work in a non-tenure track position, I would go for it and not worry about it for 1 minute. I don't really think it makes that much difference unless you have your heart set on a full-time traditional tenure track position. I think you'll have a blast and enjoy what you do. It's been my observations.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the only aspect put on there is check for the environment you're looking at. Because obviously because it's a less defined thing than tenure track, different institutions can treat it differently. So you want to ask, investigate, make sure it makes sense for the environment you're looking at. But if anything like Duke or other places I've seen, yep, it's an A+ fun time.
All right, on that note.
Can I do a quick pitch?
Yeah.
Although I don't take graduate students full-time, I do have many projects, many projects that I hire people sort of periodically. So if you're interested in science education research, feel free to contact me and we can talk about some of the smaller projects that you're certainly able to do while you have your full-time job.
That was a great offer. Thank you.